Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. As always, it's presented by Blake the Attorney Mason. We've got NCAA basketball to talk about. We've got the Crown to talk about. We get Miami getting snubbed from the NIT to talk about. Got a couple big Bengals signings to talk about as well. The Reds may not have a catcher for opening day. They're just going to throw to a blank spot because they don't have any catchers. So we got a lot to get to on this podcast. We always do. So let's get right to it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of those things more than others. And I'll just tell you right now, here's the deal with this show. Because of the way it's situated, because it's early in the week, because Xavier is playing on Wednesday, we're going to kind of go through this one a little bit faster. We're going to stick to the big Bengals signings. We're going to stick to the NCAA tournament talk. And then next week, we will maybe do another earlier week show to get our whole Reds opening day show in. Does that sound?
That's a good call. Now, and you know what? We'll wait. We got time. The Crown doesn't start for a while. We don't have to break down the Crown quite yet.
I don't think we'll get too much into the Crown. We can maybe talk a little bit about that matchup and how that all unfolded. But let's start with the Bengals. They did it. They extended Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The deals were announced at the same time by Jordan Schultz and confirmed by Higgins and Chase immediately on Twitter. Made for a wild Sunday night on social media right after Selection Sunday. Skinny, we've talked about this so much. You've kind of brought up both sides of, okay, I understand why everyone wants to do this, but also here's reasons why maybe you wouldn't want to do this and why it might not be the best move for the Bengals. So now that it has happened, where do you stand? Is this a shrewd deal or not? I mean, you have to at least give them credit for taking a big time swing here.
No question. Listen, I've been pretty good. I've always thought Jamar was going to get done. I mean, it just was a matter of where were you going to settle money wise. And I thought it was always going to be, it's funny. I thought going back to last year, we were going to be at 40 mil guaranteed. Or just slightly over 40 mil guaranteed. And maybe that's where the number was always going to go. And they didn't want to go there last year. So they went there this year because it was going to go there this year. And it did go there this year. So I always thought that one was going to get done. It was a matter of figuring out the guarantees, figuring out the exact amount, how far over 40 were you going to have to go to make him the highest paid non-quarterback. The T one was always interesting to me. I thought if it got over 30, the Bengals would balk. I thought if it got under 27, T would balk. Well, you got it like 28.8. It feels like it's right in the sweet spot for this. And, you know, we're talking to those guys today. We're recording this on Tuesday, and we have press availability with them at 2:00 today. I'm assuming they're going to do it jointly. And I know this has been brought up, I think, on social media, and I don't know how true it is, and I'll be interested to hear their answer to it, that Jamar was maybe not going to sign if T didn't sign, if the deal that like this was a joint deal, and it feels like it kind of was.
Yeah, and you hear about these things. I mean, going back to when players are recruited out of high school, you hear about the package deal, right? Like, oh, these guys want to play together in school. Those things almost never work out, right? You got to do what's best for you. You got to take your opportunity and make the most of that. For this to play out the way it did, it really does feel like it was kind of a package deal for these two guys. And also, like, throw Joe Burrow in the mix. All three of them really did want to stick together and found a way to get it done. Kind of surprising they were able to figure all of that out, that they were maybe able to make a few concessions here and there for each other to make it happen. But I also noted that the agent kind of seemed like he wanted out there that, or at least someone was putting it out there, that the agent had said that there would be no deal for Jamar without the Chase or without the T deal getting done. I was surprised to hear that. Do you think that's legit based on the way it played out, that the agent, and how big do you think T changing his agent to have the same agent as Jamar mattered in this?
Well, I think it mattered a ton because it got you off of David Mulugheta, who's pretty hard line. Again, not a knock. I don't want that to be a knock on David Mulugheta. Listen, he's trying to get his clients the best deal that he can get them, but he's pretty hard line. And I think in this case, you had one agent dealing for both guys and a chance to talk through all of it about both. And maybe that did come up of, listen, man, if we're this close on T, let's push it over the edge because you know what? We've agreed on Jamar, but you know what? Maybe we won't do the deal if we can't get T. We're this close. Let's go. I don't know the answer. I'm going to be fascinated to see what those guys say about that today, that if they really kind of played off one another or the agent played off one another and kind of made this a package deal at the end of the day. But, you know, it eliminates I wrote a column about this, Rick, at Local12.com about, you know, what the signing means. I think it takes a big chunk of the drama out of the OTAs and in the training camp and the run up to the regular season. I mean, I think the Trey Hendrickson drama is going to be gone because they've done right by Trey to this point. Try to get him traded, didn't work out. I think they're going to get him back to the bargaining table. I do think you're going to get some level of an extension. If you don't, well, then I think there will be a mutual understanding of, okay, buddy, play out this year and then you can go to free agency and maybe it's with us next year. Maybe we'll have the money next year. I still think something gets done. And if all that happens, the only drama left is finding a guard. And if that's actually kind of real drama because they do need a starting guard. But really, it takes all of what could have been April, May, mini camp, training camp, preseason drama off the table.
So one of the things that's been going around that I've heard a lot of is that they've got the highest paid non-quarterback in football with Jamar Chase now, and the highest paid number 2 wide receiver in the game. Everyone's making a big deal out of that. Skinny, I think that is really good marketing by the agent to get that number 3 out there and feel like you did a great thing. But what does highest paid number 2 receiver actually mean? You are the 33rd highest paid receiver, right?
No. So here's the funny part. If T had gone to free agency, right, what do you think he was looking for? He was looking for wide receiver 1 money, right?
Right.
That was going to be the whole plan. This is a wide receiver money. 1. Yeah. I want this. And yeah, it's more marketing. But listen, T got to get at it.
To their credit, like, I think it's good. I think it's good for the agent that everyone's buying into that, pumping that message out there that, the Bengals have the highest paid number 2 receiver. I've just never heard that term. Like, no one's ever been. First of all, how do you define? No one wants to be a number 2, right? No, if you're getting paid to be the highest, it's like, well, I'm a number 1 then. I'm not a number 2. So you never hear anyone brag about that.
He's the highest paid number 1A receiver in the marketplace. He's the only 1A receiver on the marketplace.
Right, exactly. How much of this deal getting done was because of the so-called pressure that Joe Burrow was putting on the front office?
Probably some, but again, it's not like you're signing bad players here. The only thing for me is the injury risk with T. I've been pretty consistent with that. That I think that is a real factor. Probably should have been factored in more than it was. And here's what I don't want Bengals fans to come back in 2 years if he's sitting out games going, should never sign him that contract. No, you all wanted it. Okay, you got it. It's fine. I got no qualms with it. My only qualm is that would have made me a little squeamish at the bargaining table of, listen, guy's got injury history, and we can't avoid that. And hence, we can't get, and maybe that prevented it from getting to the 30s, Rick. Maybe this is why it did settle where it settled. And again, it didn't settle in a bad place.
It had to play a role.
And the other part, too, is I don't think he was ever going to get all guaranteed money. I mean, Jamar didn't get all guaranteed money. Jamar got $112 million guaranteed. T did get 2 years of guaranteed money out of this. So there's a way to wrangle out of this eventually if the injury situation becomes really bad. You're going to be on the hook for prorated signing bonus money and all that stuff. But I do think you took a bit of a risk here with a guy that's missed the games that T has missed, and with the hamstring issues, there and a real thing. It just isn't cropped up once or twice. It's been a lot of times it's cropped up. But yeah, I mean, certainly Joe Burrow speaking that night in Dallas started the ball rolling. And listen, that's probably not a bad thing. Again, you didn't sign a chump as your second receiver here. You signed a guy when he's on the field, does play ball.
So that's one side of the Joe Burrow thing. But then the other side is, how much pressure does this put on Joe Burrow now? Okay, you got what you wanted, and it wasn't like they went and found a bunch of pass rushers to help out your team. They went and got you the weapons that you said you needed. So now, I mean, obviously it's all basically narrative at this point and what the media is going to say about you, but it would seem that there's going to be a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow to put up now.
You don't think he's handled the pressure to this point?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, if anybody's going to handle
it's not a concern, but I'm more talking about a narrative perspective, right? Like Joe Burrow's not going to be bothered by that, but like in the national media, if the Bengals don't win now or the offense doesn't put up big numbers, Joe Burrow's going to be crushed. I
wish I could remember who it was. Was it Ryan Clark maybe? I was a talking head of some kind that said, listen, man, now you get 9 possessions in a game, you better score 7 touchdowns. I'm like, come on, like, give me a break. I mean, come on. Score 7 times maybe. Okay, I'll give you maybe that. But I mean, come on. That's some silly. But I do think, I mean, listen, yeah, you got what you wanted. I mean, he asked for Mike Gesicki back too, remember?
Yep.
Mike G. Got him back at a probably a little more inflated rate than it was going to be if he hadn't spoken up about it. So you're right. I mean, you got all your guys now. Go make some magic. He's made a lot of magic at this point. I don't expect him not to going forward.
What do you think Al Golden's thoughts are on all of this right now? He's just seen the money going out the window all on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, they've gotten him a little bit of help on the defensive side, but no serious upgrades.
I think part of the thing, I think part of it is there wasn't that pass rusher on the market where you're like, I got to go overspend for that guy. And then you got down to a bunch of medium range guys, and it's like, Joseph Osai's a medium price guy. I'm going to get him back. The one thing you couldn't do was lose Trey Hendrickson and not replace him with a frontline edge rusher. And they're not going to do that. Trust me, he is here for this year. I mean, there's no trade out there, in my opinion, that's going to take place. I think the Bengals knew that all along. They just decided, well, let's do a solid. If you can get us back these things, then we'll certainly consider it. Well, they couldn't get him back. In fact, the agent even said, we think we can get a first-round pick. Well, you couldn't. You tried. They let you try. You couldn't. And now you have Trey back. And now you go early in the draft and address edge rusher there, and you have put another body. And now you have Osai, Miles Murphy, Trey Henderson, and draft pick guy. Is it great? No. Is it perfect? No. Is the potential there for it to be good? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. I guess the thought there, though, is not so much that they're just relying on Al Golden to be a huge upgrade over Lou Anarumo.
Well, I think they are.
So do you think that they're basically looking at this and saying, we feel that this was mostly Lou Anarumo's fault last year?
Yeah, no, I do. I don't think that's fair, but I do, because you are kind of running it back with the same guys.
But do you think that's because of what you just laid out, that there wasn't upgrades available, or do you think it's because they feel Lou Anarumo was the issue? I
think a little bit of both. And again, I don't think there were a lot of upgrades available. I mean, they got a run-stopping defensive tackle who's a rotational piece. Okay, you're 4 deep now at defensive tackle. You brought B.J. Hill back. I mean, don't forget, they paid a pretty penny for B.J. Hill. I mean, $11 million on average. I know it's backloaded, but 3 years, $33 million was probably more than I thought he was going to get.
Sure, but I think everyone would look at that and say, great, you had B.J. Hill last year and you sucked. So
true, but B.J. Hill actually had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah. That's not a bad addition, but the whole idea was you need to get better. Duke Tobin kept saying, like, we're going to get better. And I think if you look at the defense side of the ball, at best, you're back to where you were. I mean,
correct. And that's where I think I don't know if this is going to happen, but I believe they think Al Golden is going to at least fix that. Is this going to be a top 15 defense? Probably not. It doesn't have to be, but it can't just keep losing games when you score 33 points either.
In terms of what's next, I think you've already mentioned it. Is it just guard at this point? Is that where all the focus turns?
I would say guard.
Experienced pass rusher, maybe?
Yeah, at a discounted price, probably.
Yeah.
I think they still cut Pratt and find a linebacker. That would be a tit for tat trade for me. Like you save $6 million, all right, then you go spend that $6 million. And I still can't imagine they don't go get some level of veteran safety. I mean, right now you're rolling with Geno Stone and Jordan Battle and not much depth behind them. I mean, right now the third safety in the room is Dejon Anthony, for goodness sakes. Tyson Anderson's in the room too, but he's more of a special teams guy. So I listen, there's still a lot out there. It's not sexy. I mean, I remember when they got Mike Hilton, it didn't feel like that was a very sexy pickup, right? Like it was a nice pickup. And Mike's still out there too. I mean, if Mike doesn't find a suitor, maybe Mike comes back here. Maybe Mike plays safety, for goodness sakes.
That's just going to be a perpetual thing we say every year of like, hey, if they need help in the secondary, Mike Hilton might come back.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Skinny, I think there's a lot of people now who are doing the whole, especially from a national perspective, going, great, you got the weapons, but you're not protecting the franchise. You can't protect Joe Burrow. You got to have an offensive line in front of him. I've seen even Bengals fans talk about how they haven't done a good job of protecting Joe Burrow over the last few seasons. One thing I'll say is they've done all they can in terms of spending money on offensive line upgrades the last few years. It hasn't all worked out the way they wanted to, but they've done everything they can in that regard. The other thing I'll mention is out of the last 4 years, their worst offensive line is the one that went to a Super Bowl. Is it not?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So everyone's obsessed with protecting Joe Burrow. And I don't get me wrong. I think that's important. But I also think when you're playing really good pass rushers, it's impossible to win those battles to some extent. Like your quarterback is going to be under pressure. Part of what's important in the NFL is having a guy like Joe Burrow back there who can handle those situations. And the Bengals have that now. And they've given him the weapons. You want to protect him as much as you can, but I don't think it's this they're in as dire of a spot with that as some others believe.
Well, and we all wrote stories about this last year at different times of the season, of the evolution of Joe Burrow making plays off script. He got really good at that. I mean, I think that's now a strength of his. It's always been a strength of Mahomes, right? Of you think you got him and he escapes and he runs around for another 5 seconds and maybe then he runs for 10 yards and a first down, or wait a minute, he'll flick it to a guy down. I thought Joe was great at that last year. And as much as this team drops back, honestly, this offensive line does a pretty good job. It really does. I know people don't think he should ever get sacked. It's not realistic, man. And I'd also like I don't have this in front of me. I'm sure there's an advanced analytic on this. Joe even talks about this, that there are times where he's willing to take a sack. He's willing to hold on 3rd and 13 when it's either I'm going to complete this or we're going to punt anyway. What difference does it make if we punt 6 yards further back?
That's the thing that I don't think a lot of people have caught on to yet. I mean, people that are really paying attention to the Bengals know this because he's said it multiple times, but a lot of people throw his sack number out there, his total sack number out there without acknowledging that he says all the time, I take sacks on purpose in 3rd down situations where we're going to punt next because I have the ability to make a huge play in those situations. If I can extend it longer and okay, maybe we end up losing 7 or 8 yards on that play and then we punt from 7 or 8 yards farther back, but there's also the chance that I do some Joe Burrow magic and we win the game because of it. So I think that sack number is skewed a little bit for certain.
And don't get me wrong here. They still need to get a swing tackle, even though Cody Ford can be that guy. But you also can't line up the season with Cody Ford and Cordell Volson as your starting guards. I mean, so they've got to address that position.
All right. Any other thoughts here on the Bengals, Chase, Higgins, anything else?
I can't tell you, even though it came at a wacky time of the day, on a wacky end to a Sunday that's always just hairy for those of us in the business. I'm glad it's over with. I really am. After today's over with, I'm going to take a deep breath and go, thank God my offseason is not going to be a freaking waste of time.
Yeah. I imagine that's got to feel good for all of you. I heard Kelsey on with Mo yesterday talking about it, and she was very relieved. So imagine all of you guys that have been dealing with this saga for the last, 3 years now, basically?
Feels like it.
Yeah. All right. Let's get on to college basketball. March Madness, best time of the year. Skinny Xavier got in as an 11 seed. That was probably the biggest storyline locally.
So let me ask you this. So I meant to text you at this time, but I'm right. By the way, this is my sheet from Sunday. I was writing the teams down because then I had to put a story up. I already pre-wrote a Kentucky story, pre-wrote a Xavier story getting in, pre-wrote a Xavier story not getting in, put in a Xavier story getting into the crown. I had it all mapped out in different ways. So I texted my friend Todd Curlis, who works at iHeartMedia. He's a Xavier season ticket holder. You know him well. Our boss, Mark Jusak, my boss, Mark Jusak, your former boss. He's a huge Xavier fan. And when North Carolina went on the board, I texted them both separately. I went, uh-oh, that's a bad sign. What did you think when you saw Carolina go up?
The opposite.
Really?
Yeah, because if Carolina was in, Xavier had to be in my opinion, because the whole thing with Xavier is they have one quad one win.
Yeah, true.
And that's going to keep them out. But then when you see Carolina get in with a worse resume than Xavier, they had a quad 3 loss, they have a worse quad 1 record. At that point, I was like, well, I think Xavier, the only thing that you're worried about at that point is, did Xavier get the Bubba Cunningham treatment?
Right.
Did North Carolina just replace Xavier as the last team in the tournament?
That was my fear as well. I mean, listen, there's a lot of layers to the Carolina situation, right? I mean, you can argue they beat Duke without the lane violation, whatever. They're 8-0 in quad 2s. There's some arguments to be made there. But you can't tell me, even with Bubba Cunningham not in that room, that there wasn't favoritism shown to that team. And that's what my fear was they're the last ones in because of him.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what happened. And that's what people should be mad about. I talked about this with Paul Fritchner last night, but the whole West Virginia didn't get in, Indiana get in, any of these teams that got left out, even had it been Xavier, if Xavier would have been left out because of that, you have no argument. Your resume was terrible. Yourself. You had a bad season. You should have earned your way in. But at the same time, I am annoyed that North Carolina got in. They should not have been in, and they're only in because of Bubba Cunningham being the chair of the committee.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I'm just, again, this has always been a subjective thing. They try to put some analytics behind it, right? It just doesn't feel like there's a set pattern of what they look at. To your point, I mean, like,
there isn't.
Quad 1 wins should mean something, and neither one of those had them. Now, they didn't have, I think Xavier had a quad 3 or quad 4 loss, if I'm not mistaken, right? They had none. Yeah, I mean, so they had no bad losses. But what is, like, at the end of the day, when you start stacking the bubble teams, what is the final criteria for them?
I still think biggest wins on the road are most important. And this holds true every year. I mean, people say we don't know, but at the end of the day, it almost always comes down to biggest wins on the road, strength of schedule. And this year, something that looked like they followed really closely was the Bar Torvik numbers for advanced metrics and the wins above bubble. So now, did North Carolina kind of break some of those? Yeah, North Carolina doesn't fit in perfectly to all those categories like the other teams did. But for the most part, when you look at the way teams were seeded and the teams on the bubble, those seem to be the things that were favored the most, aside from maybe North Carolina's situation. So, I just don't get so worked up about the bubble every year, because those teams, the bigger the tournament gets, those teams stink more and more. So it's like if you're on the bubble, you deserve whatever fate you get.
Well, and again, back to your point, how many opportunities do you get? I mean, you could argue Carolina had a final opportunity with Duke and blew it. You can argue that Xavier had a final opportunity with Marquette and blew it. You could argue that the Indiana-Ohio State game should have been an elimination game. Well, it wasn't, because then one eliminated the other, and then the other got eliminated in the Big Ten tournament. So West Virginia, you got Colorado. It's a winnable game in your conference tournament. I'm not here to tell you if you win that game, you're in, but that loss sure didn't help you. And so you had opportunities, man.
Yeah. So Xavier gets in as the 11th seed, first 4 in Dayton. They play Texas Wednesday night. 9:10 p.m. is the given tip time, but they're the second game, so we'll start at like midnight and we'll be right until 4 in the morning. If they win that game, they get a first round matchup with Illinois on Friday, 9:45. And then the likely second round matchup waiting there would be 3-seeded Kentucky at that point, which makes for some interesting storylines. But let's start with Xavier here and their first 4 game against Texas. Skinny, where are you at on Xavier after another second half collapse against Marquette in the Big East tournament? Because it felt like they were kind of getting over that as they won those 7 games down the stretch of the regular season. Now to see that rear its head again, where you have a double-digit lead, you collapse, you can't get your offense going when you need it to. You have some mishaps. Obviously Marquette was throwing in a lot of shots in that second half there. But what's your take now on Xavier after seeing that?
You probably crunch this more than I have. I'm doing an eyeball test of a team I only watched a few times, including a couple times in the SEC tournament. I think it's a bad matchup for Xavier because Texas feels like it can score in bunches. I mean, they got Trey Johnson, the freshman's really good. Tremont Mark's really good. They go through stretches where it feels like they don't miss. And that would scare me that they are able to put runs on when Xavier feels like it's had an inability to stop runs at times this year.
Texas is a scary team in general, but it's also when you're playing in the NCAA tournament, I mean, you're expecting to play a pretty good team. And the one thing you can say about Texas is at no point this year have they figured it out and started playing good basketball. I mean, they were playing their worst right at the end of the regular season, to be quite honest. Their defense had gotten terrible. Now, they did win 2 big games in the SEC tournament, but they are a lackadaisical, not sharp. I mean, Paul Fritchner just did an interview with the 24/7 beat writer for Texas the other night. And when he asked him about what Texas looked like, the beat writer, one of the beat writers for Texas, and this is not an uncommon sentiment, said they look like an AAU team that doesn't practice.
Well, the thing is that coach is still on the hot seat, right?
Rodney Terry is very much on the hot seat. And that's another reason where if you're a Xavier fan, you feel pretty good about this matchup. Sean Miller is a hell of a lot better than Rodney Terry. I don't think that's debatable.
Correct. Did I see a couple weeks ago? I don't remember where I saw it that Sean's name was mentioned with a possible Texas opening.
Oh yeah. So now this was reported at the time, but it's come back again now that Texas is considering getting rid of Rodney Terry. The kind of the thing that's been said is if he doesn't win 2 games in the tournament, meaning a play-in game and get out of the first round, then he is going to be gone after this year. And so a lot of people have brought back up the fact that Sean Miller was allegedly one of the favorites for Texas to hire last time when Rodney Terry won that job by beating Sean Miller in the NCAA tournament and then playing his way to the Elite Eight. He ended up earning that job, getting the interim tag removed when they didn't really want to hire him in the first place. Allegedly, Sean Miller was one of their targets at that time. I'm sure Sean Miller's name will come back up if that job opens. I don't get the sense right now that Sean Miller is going to leave Xavier this offseason, but you never say never, especially in this era of the sport. And if a job like Texas comes calling, it would certainly get interesting. And I do think when it opens, his name will be brought up there for sure.
Yeah, the winner of this game can get to the Sweet 16, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think Illinois is great, and they have some games where they just look. Now, there's games they look like world beaters.
Yes.
There's some games you're like, what is their problem today? And as much as I'm a Kentucky grad, I'm a fan again, right? They're beatable. I mean, they
especially as banged up as they are.
Yeah, correct. I mean, they're beatable. So I could see. I'm not sure I can see an NC State running one of these teams as an 11 seed, but I can see a Sweet 16 run for these teams.
Yeah, it's really an interesting draw for Xavier because I do think with Texas, like you mentioned, I mean, they could create real problems with their athleticism on the perimeter and the fact that Caden Shedrick is a lob threat, the pick and roll kind of Ryan Kalkbrenner a little bit. Like Xavier's had some issues with that this year, but then they've also played really well against Ryan Kalkbrenner in that game at Cintas Center, and they blew Creighton out of the gym, and there's that. But I also look at Texas as a team that plays the exact style of defense that Xavier wants to face. They don't get out and disrupt your offensive flow. They don't get a lot of turnovers. They are kind of lackadaisical in terms of getting out and closing out on shooters. They allow teams to shoot 39% on catch and shoot 3-point opportunities, which is what Xavier wants. So there's a lot of things to like about this matchup for Xavier, but it's also, like you said, Texas is scary. Trey Johnson is a real top 5 pick in the upcoming NBA draft, and they've got 3 other athletic drivers to go around him, which can cause problems for Xavier's defense. It's going to be a great game. And then Illinois, they can be one of the best teams in the country, especially when Yakachunas, their lottery pick in the upcoming draft, is playing well. But they can also be an absolute disaster at times and shoot themselves out of a game in the first 20 minutes and you feel great at halftime against them. And then Kentucky's so banged up and they're a good matchup fit for Xavier that it really is a fascinating draw. I think the biggest thing in this first matchup, if I'm a Xavier fan, I'm just going to lead heavily on my faith in Sean Miller over Rodney Terry.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Maybe Sean learned a lesson, and I get why he did it. I mean, he thought he had enough of a lead to put his two guys on the bench and at the same time. And maybe this is one where you go, okay, I got to have one of them on the floor at all times. Meaning Ryan Conwell and Zach Freeman.
Right. That felt like an interesting moment in that Marquette game because they went to the bench and that's where everything unraveled and they couldn't get it back after that. So a lot of fans brought that up too.
Listen, I've got 2 possessions maybe until we get to the whatever that was, under 12 timeout. I'll buy him a minute here. We got the timeout. It's going to be long because it's a tournament game. I'll maybe get 1 possession out of the timeout, then get him in. And before you know it, it just went like that.
Yeah. One thing to watch in this Texas matchup, Dayton Swain's foul trouble. You're going to need him to be able to guard Trey Johnson, who is shifty as can be and really hard to guard, a tough shot maker. If Dayton Swain picks up 2 quick fouls, I don't know that you have another guy capable of slowing him down.
I was going to say, who else can you put on him at that point?
Probably Marcus Foster, but he doesn't have the quickness and length that Dayton Swain does. He has pretty long arms, about 6'5"-ish, 2 inches shorter than Dayton, and he's much more physical, but he is not as quick as Dayton and is not quite the defender that Dayton is. So, yeah, it would be difficult at that point. Kentucky, dancing as a 3 seed. They will play Troy on Friday at 7:10. It sounds like Lamont Butler is going to return for this first round game. Is that the vibe right now?
Yeah, until the shoulder goes back out. I mean, it's one of those ones. I think this is one where you go minute by minute whether or not the guy can play or not. And I love the fact he's so gutsy trying to do it, and he's so important to this team. But yeah, and until he takes a charge or until he gets knocked down, in a loose ball.
Yeah, it's huge that he's going to be out there because they're a different team with him than without him. But it feels like every time he gets a bump or hits the floor, there's a good chance that he's going to be coming out of the game and be done for the tournament. So that is a precarious situation.
I had a friend of mine growing up. He could separate his own shoulder. Yeah. It was the grossest thing ever. And he just do it sometimes just to get us.
Shout out to Mike Daniels, like a Covington legend when we were growing up. He ended up at Holy Cross with me for at least a year or two. When we were in high school, he was supposed to be this phenomenal athlete coming up out of middle school, and he was an impressive athlete. Had some issues kind of staying on the right path at times and staying on teams, but he had that where like he played football and basketball, and it's like every other day his shoulder would pop out of place and he'd be out for a week and they'd have to get that fixed and then he'd come back. But yeah, very strange deal when all those things get loosened up around there. Kentucky got smoked by Alabama in the SEC quarters, 99-70 after they beat Oklahoma 85-84 on a buzzer beater by Otega Owe the night before. What did you think about the SEC performance by the Cats, Skinny? I mean, kind of just throw it out the window at this point because they've been that way.
The Oklahoma win looked like it was going to be nice and clean and fun, and you feel really good as opposed to, oh my gosh, we blew a 10-point lead with a minute something to go and had to get a guy to throw a bucket in to win it. Alabama game, that was, to me, they A, ran out of gas, B, ran out of mojo and juice when Lamont Butler went out. I mean, they just look like a different team. I mean, they just didn't have enough bodies, to be quite frank. And listen, Alabama, when it gets on a roll, can be really, really good. They also have their flaws, but when they get on a roll, especially offensively, I don't care what you think, you're not stopping them from scoring at all because they're just going to keep coming at you.
From a metric standpoint, they are not one of the teams that are darling to win this year's NCAA tournament. A lot of people are saying they're not one of those teams that have a good chance. Man, with Nate Oates and that system and the way they play every year in the tournament, I feel like they're dangerous this year. I feel like they're dangerous every year.
We'll go through this in a second because I've got about 12 teams circled on the Ken Pom metric. They're circled, but they're just outside one of the key metric numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I understand that. I like them when it comes tournament time. I really like his style, and they are so analytic heavy.
Well, I think part of it, Rick, is that style is, it feels like they play without any pressure because they just don't give a damn. That's not fair and that's not right, but that's what tournament pressure doesn't bother them because we're just going to play our style. And
yeah, so they just go get great shots all game long. Yeah. It's hard to beat a team that just figures out a way to get great looks at the rim the entire game. I mean, it's impressive what they do on offense. It really is.
I will say the potential second round matchup of them and St. Mary's, because St. Mary's is elite defensively.
Slow.
Yeah, and they are slow.
Yeah. The SEC set a record with 14 out of 16 teams getting in the tournament. 2 seeds, 2 1 seeds might be crazier than the fact that they got 14 teams in itself. Plus, obviously, Kentucky was a 3 seed. Skinny, is this terrible for the sport? Do you hate it? I mean, also, if you're an SEC fan, like Kentucky, for instance, they might be playing 2 SEC teams pretty early on in the tournament here.
You have to play. Okay, so if things work out, and this is always the big if things work out, they would have to play Tennessee in the Sweet 16. Houston probably, again, if the seeds work out, but then probably, an Auburn on the other side, a Florida on the other side. It's crazy.
Yeah, I just don't, that to me, that if I'm an SEC fan, that would be kind of dumb. It's you get excited about the opportunity to play other teams and play teams that aren't in your conference, that haven't scouted you, that don't know you as well in the tournament, to get to a Sweet 16 game and be like, we're playing Tennessee. I mean, yes, that crowd will be insane in Indianapolis, but
you potentially play Texas in the second round and then Tennessee. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's just, all the SEC teams that are in here, it makes it inevitable that you're going to match up.
So did the SEC, I don't want to say, because remember last year was a big argument. The Big 12 was wise to game the system in non-conference and set themselves up to when it got to conference time that they weren't cannibalizing each other. They were just really improving each other more than anything else.
Yep.
And the SEC, a lot was made that they had the best winning percentage, of all time non-conference, 899 or 889, whatever the hell it was something crazy. Although don't forget, was it Archie Miller who was confused how the SEC was any good because they were only 500 in conference play.
Yeah.
Neither here nor there. So the question is, did they game the system, and do other conferences look at that?
Yes, but everyone's trying to do it. The Big East tried to do it this year. Like, look how Xavier scheduled. The problem is you've got to win all of those games, and you've got to win them by a large margin.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at what would be considered bad SEC losses. I think Kentucky's loss to Ohio State, I don't know if it qualifies as bad because it was a quad 2, because they didn't have any quad 3 or quad 4. So I don't think that's a bad loss, but that's probably one of the worst. It's one of the few losses the SEC had non-conference. That wasn't even really that bad of a loss.
Sean Miller brought that up and talked about it kind of extensively during his press conference after Xavier made the tournament Sunday night. And I'd asked him about something else, and he kind of just avoided. I asked him about recruiting the transfer portal, how important it'd be to be in the tournament. And he kind of avoided it and talked about that more so. Is that like, hey, our sport now is 3 months. March is when it all happens. Obviously, you got to win in March, but December and November and December is when you've really got to make hay in those first couple months and have a historic run the way the SEC did this year, because you have so many conference games and it just becomes an echo chamber once you get in there. If you all have good metrics, once you get inside conference play, then you can beat up on each other and it's good for everybody. But if you don't have great metrics, then it's not going to be. And so the problem for schools like the Big East is they've tried to game that system, and what it resulted in is them dragging themselves down with the Mountain West Conference.
Right.
Because the last 2 years, they've been right there with the Mountain West trying to fight for the last bubble spots. And I think one of their issues is a lot of them now have strength of schedules that look exactly like the mid-major teams. So it makes it a lot easier to conflate the two resumes. If I was Xavier and I was teams in the Big East, I would go away from that model. I would try to play a more difficult schedule, give myself more chances for quad 1 and quad 2 wins, and hope your metrics look a lot better.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Kentucky to make the Sweet 16 is plus 104. Now, we just talked about how interesting of a draw it could be for Xavier, the fact that you have some winnable games there, quote unquote. But for Kentucky too, Skinny, God, this is a nice opportunity to get to the Sweet 16. I feel like for the odds to be just plus 104, I kind of agree with Vegas there. I think this is a pretty darn good draw for a team that's a bit banged up right now.
Yeah, I think it's a very good draw. But I don't like those odds. I mean, if you could give me 2-1, I might think about taking it. But basically, even money, I just
no. I don't like those odds. I'm more interested about what those odds say about Kentucky's chances.
Yeah, no,
the fact that they're plus 104 tells you that this is a pretty good draw.
I don't think they get tripped up by Troy. Oakland was a perfect storm for them last year, especially with the shot making ability and the fact they shot so many threes. Troy just doesn't. They play it's funny. They're up there in fewest points per game in the country. But if you look at their defensive metric, it's not all that great. They're not a great offensive team. Yeah, it's just I think this first matchup for Kentucky is a good one. After that, though, Illinois is athletic, Texas is athletic. I honestly think Xavier's a pretty good matchup for them. But again,
they're a good matchup for each other. They're both what the other one wants to face.
Good point.
Yeah.
And if you want to take it all the way out, I mean, I know it's hard to beat a good team 3 times in a season, but you've beaten Tennessee twice. Now you beat them when you were healthy, but you beat them twice.
that atmosphere for that game
Ooh,
in Indy with those two fan bases. Oh my goodness. With the both of them being good.
Yeah, especially if the Tennessee fan base invades Rupp Arena this week.
Oh yeah. All right. Anything else on Kentucky before we?
No, I'm disappointed that they're not healthy because it would have been fun to see what this team could have done. I don't think it's a Final Four team. I don't think it's a national championship team, and I think everybody in the fan base would be more than satisfied with a Sweet 16 appearance, and then from whatever happens from there is complete gravy.
No, you have to beat Troy. They cannot. Sure. Afford another disaster in the first round. Otherwise, people start turning already.
No, 3 times in the last 4 years, you've lost a 14, and then back to the
15.
St. Peter's, the 15. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to win that one. If you win that one, then I think almost anything else can kind of be excusable for Mark Pope. First year, all the roster turnover and all the injuries that they've had. I think you can get by with that. But that being said, for a team that is deeply flawed and does have the injuries they have right now, they have a draw where they can actually make some noise. So I agree. It worked out well for them. Before we get to Cincinnati and the Crown or any of that stuff, what first round games are you most looking forward to? Do you have any that you like here?
Yeah, there's a couple. I got to find McNeese State. Where's my McNeese State?
McNeese versus Clemson.
Yes.
Will Wade versus Brad Brownell, two of the top candidates in this year's coaching cycle. Plus, Will Wade is a Clemson alum. He went to Clemson. That's going to be a great game. That's 3:15 on Thursday.
Yeah, believe it or not, another one I like in its 6-11 game is VCU BYU. VCU metrics are actually pretty close in a Ken Pom metric for winning a national championship. And BYU, we saw them get hot at the end of the season. The 3 seed there is Wisconsin, which I really love. I like Wisconsin to maybe go to the Final Four if I'm going to pick some of these things. I think they're really, really good. They got a bunch of guys who can make shots. But that's one. Missouri Drake is one because I think Drake beats Missouri. In fact, I think Drake beats Missouri and then beats Texas Tech. I really do.
Oh, wow.
So.
Wow. All right. I like, first of all, Creighton versus Louisville to kick off or tip everything off.
The reaction of Pat Kelsey when his team got an 8 seed was priceless, in my opinion. Like, he couldn't believe that, and he's probably right.
Oh, yeah. They had a much better resume. I was surprised by that one. I do think they got screwed.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I'm Auburn, as much as they look sluggish down the stretch and in the SEC tournament, I do think they're really good. I think you would agree with it. They're really good. But they're not infallible, and they proved that late in the year. Their second-round matchup with either Louisville or Creighton is fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This Creighton-Louisville game is a big one because both those teams are dangerous. They're both good teams, and it's just a fun game to start the entire tournament off with. There's nothing else in that time slot. The rest of those first games Thursday are terrible, so that game we are going to be clinging to there at Holy Grail after Mo's show. Arkansas, Kansas, you've got Cal versus Self, granted a watered-down old man version of it, with Rick Pitino waiting in the next round for either one of them.
That's crazy.
That's incredible. Hey, here's one that people aren't going to realize, but
hang on. Give me the numbers.
I think this is a 6-11. Right, I don't know. I've just got the matchup written down. It doesn't matter. Just listen. Utah State versus UCLA.
That is a 7-10. Yeah.
Okay. Here's why that's going to be interesting. Eric Hout was a former NKU associate head coach. He is now out there with Jared Calhoun at Utah State. He was the defensive coordinator for NKU. He's now the defensive coordinator for Utah State. That's the reason they brought him out there, because they wanted the fist defense, the matchup zone that NKU got from watching Mick Cronin's UC teams.
That's great.
Now Eric Hout is going to be running this defense for Utah State. He's not the head coach. He's the associate head coach, but he's going to be running this defense against Mick Cronin for UCLA. That's going to be an interesting backstory line there. And
you forgot to add something to it. Future University of Cincinnati head coach Jared Calhoun.
That's right. So something for UC fans to watch right there. That'll be an interesting one. Another game that I think is just fun because everyone loves Colorado State over Memphis. 12/5 upset. Colorado State is actually the favorite in that game by betting odds, but everyone's going to have it in their bracket. 12/5 there. Everyone hates Memphis. I don't. I'm going to have Memphis winning that game.
I think Memphis is really good for the reason of they can chase down. They got 2 mooses that can chase down misses.
Yeah. They can give you problems. They're ugly to watch, so everyone thinks they stink, but they can give you problems to match up with. And then,
here's one other I got for you, and I don't know why, but I got to watching them over the weekend for a couple of games, and I like them a lot. Yale and Texas A&M.
Really?
I like Yale.
Okay. I'll take your word for that. I haven't watched much Yale. I do not like watching Texas A&M.
They just like to chuck it up and go chase it down.
Yeah. The last one I have on my list is New Mexico Marquette. Big time guard matchup. You've got Cam Jones, who at one point was playing like the best player in the country. He's tailed off a bit, but I think we'll see an uptick playing against non-Big East teams. And then how about this name for New Mexico? Really fun to watch. He scores like 20 points a game too. Donovan Dent. Donnie Dent is going to be going up against Cam Jones in that matchup Friday.
Is he related to Rodney Dent? Former UK center Rodney Dent?
I don't think so. He, might be related to Donnie Darko though. I haven't heard. Are there any bets you love, Skinny?
I haven't looked yet, so I'm going to have to pass on that one for the moment.
Can I give you one theory that I like that I saw? The Mountain West has been an interesting team. They keep getting a lot of teams in here. It feels like they've been overseeded every year. So I looked into it, and even despite the fact that San Diego State made that run to the Final Four, championship actually, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The Mountain West.
Yeah, they did with Lamont Butler.
Yeah, 26, 53, and 2 since 2005 against the spread. So a 33% winning percentage in the NCAA tournament against the spread. That's since 2005. Since 2019, when we've seen a lot of these Mountain West teams getting in recently, they're 7-20 against the spread, 26% winning percentage. Fade the Mountain West.
Fade the Mountain West for sure. No question about that.
Give me your Final Four.
All right, I'm gonna go with a dark one in the East. I'll go Wisconsin. I don't know why I've fallen in love with them of late, but I have. I'm going to stick with the chalk in the Midwest with Houston. In the West, I'm going to stick with the chalk in Florida. And in the South, I'm going to go with Michigan State and Izzo.
All right.
I want to love St. John's. I do love St. John's. St. John's has a coach who knows how to win this tournament. But again, if you want to go by the Ken Pom metrics, which every year since 2000, you got to be top 40 offensively, top 25 defensively. That's what and St. John's is number 1 in defense, and they're 65th in offense. Now they chased out a lot of misses, but I don't know if I can trust them.
It just feels like someone's going to like zone them up or junk them up at some point. Sort of like that Coach Cal team, his first year with John Wall and Boogie Cousins, they just faced that West Virginia Bob Huggins zone with athletes, and they just couldn't make a shot. And it feels like that'll happen at some point to St. John's.
Well, in one front line, in my opinion, that can stand up to St. John's is Florida's, and that's who they would meet in the championship in the West region.
Yep. So that being said, I've got St. John's in my final.
No, listen. I love them. There's nothing not to like about them. In fact, if you didn't
the fact that they can't shoot.
Right. If you didn't give me metrics, though, and just let me do the eyeball test and what they've accomplished, I'd run to the Final Four with them. The problem is I think Florida's the best team in the country right now, and that's the team standing in the way in this regional.
They're playing really, really well. Here's my Final Four. My dark horse is Michigan. I think that Michigan team is underrated. I think they have everything they need to win a national championship.
It was a gutsy win on Sunday, I will tell you that. Although, for a lot of people, this UC San Diego team is the chic pick because it's the 12-5 game.
It's a terrible upset pick by everyone. Everyone loves doing the 12-5 thing. Terrible upset pick. Duke, I've got going chalk. Then I like St. John's as a 2 seed. And then I'm going chalk with Houston as well.
And who'd you have in the East? Who'd you have there?
Michigan, Duke, St. John's, Houston.
Michigan. Oh, Duke. I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. I'm looking right at Duke. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I know Flag will probably be healthy and all. I just don't know how will they handle that pressure.
I know, but I also just think they're clearly the best team. And weirdly, the better seeds the last 2 years, that's another interesting thing in the tournament. For years and years, it was like 50% or worse in terms of the better seeds winning percentage in the NCAA tournament. The last 2 years, the better seeds have won at like a 55% plus rate in the tournament. So it's skewed a little bit heavy towards the favorites as of late.
Yeah, I think that one Final Four with Florida Atlantic and San Diego State, drawing a blank on who the other two were. I think that got all of us going, wow, look at what can happen in any given year. That feels like more of an outlier.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, any other final thoughts on the tournament, Skinny, before we get to ask anything?
No, I'm looking forward to the whole thing as always. I'm sure you are too.
All right, any thoughts on
rules and bets and brackets and all that kind of stuff?
It's the best.
By the way, do you want to go to Milwaukee if Xavier in Milwaukee?
They would be in Milwaukee, yes.
Yeah. Mark Pope said last night on his radio show that
you pay for my gas?
Yeah.
I might. He's going to get, by the way, he mentioned that. He's like, if you have trouble getting up there, you need some gas money, hit me up. He is going to have every bum in the 606 and 859
of course
asking him for cash.
Coach Pope, could you buy me an airline ticket from down here in Chattanooga? I'm
gonna tune in to the pregame show on Kentucky to when will that be? Friday. Yep. Just to hear Clem from Harlan County call in and ask where he can get his rebate from Coach Pope.
I think this is one he's going to regret.
Yeah, that seemed like a bad idea. It's one where you say it because you're trying to be funny and the fun coach, and then you get done, you go, oh no, that was not a good idea.
Yeah, it was not a good idea.
Poor Susan at the athletics office is going to be bombarded with emails and calls asking for $20 to get to Route 5.
10,000 individual cars apparently are going to be trekking to Milwaukee.
Yeah, exactly. The emissions testing in the mountains is going to be brutal this year.
Yep. Oh my heavens.
What did you think about the crown matchup between Cincinnati and DePaul? Are you excited about that one?
I just had to laugh. I mean, I thought the teams. So for those who don't know the crown, it's a 16-team tournament, 2 automatic qualifiers from the Big 12, the Big East, and the Big 10, and then 10 at-larges. And I thought everybody, and the way they did it was you were chosen by net ranking, right?
Yeah, top two to not getting in the NCAA tournament
based on net.
Yeah.
And I thought those teams had to go, but apparently they didn't because some teams backed out.
Yeah. So originally when they announced it, they said those teams, those conferences have agreed to participate and play. It sounded like there's maybe an out if you said you weren't going to have enough players to participate, which seems like every team could just say that then.
Correct.
With the portal coming up. So
the Big East got 3 teams in this then?
Yeah, DePaul ended up getting in 2, I guess.
Yeah, DePaul's playing UC.
Yeah. I guess they were the 3rd team in.
How did that happen? How are they even in the postseason of any? How could they even be in the CBI? How did that happen?
Because these tournaments are meaningless and stupid. They're just like bowl games in football that aren't the actual championship games. I mean, it means nothing. This is a terrible idea. I've never been more nervous for a selection Sunday in my life than this one because I was so worried about having to covering the crown when it starts on April 1st, a week after the transfer portal opens.
That's crazy.
Here's what the worst part about it is. All the players that are going to be rumored to be leaving and getting in the portal, and like the team's going to be telling me, no, we're not announcing anybody. No one's going to the portal yet. And yet the players are going to be announcing on their own saying, yeah, I'm in the portal. It would just be a disaster leading up to the start of that tournament that I didn't want to deal with. And God bless the UC people that'll have to.
Yeah, well, I do like this one too, before we get on to asking you anything. So I had pre-written, like I said, a story on UC going to the crown, Xavier going to the crown, just to have them done. Because the way I read it was going to be announced on Sunday night initially. Well, it wasn't. So I was doing something yesterday. My boss texted me and he said, hey, UC sent out a thing about the crown. I said, well, I got a story. He goes, no, I'll just put a press release. We're good. I said, okay, you sure? He goes, yeah. So then I read the story when we put it online. And at the very last paragraph was, this will be the 3rd time in Wes Miller's coaching career at UC he's taken a team to the postseason. Are you serious? Are you really serious? He's trying to sell anybody on that?
That's honestly doing more damage than help.
Right.
This was also another, just a great look at sort of how the Wes Miller era has gone for UC. This was a tweet by our guy, Chad Brendel, who covers the team in 2022 after the season when they weren't going to qualify for a tournament. Said, thought you guys would appreciate this. When I was digging around yesterday to see if playing in one of the secondary events was an option, a source told me, quote, Cincinnati doesn't play in that blank. This was from yesterday. Cincinnati will face DePaul on April 1st at 3 p.m. in the Crown Tournament. Things have changed a bit over there in Clifton.
Well, and that's why I'll say, because I thought the teams had to play in, is what I thought.
Yeah. Skinny, how much value? Well, I mean, anytime you can take your team to a 3rd postseason, you got to do it. Oh, yeah.
Got to do it.
You got to do it. How much value do you think there would be in a mini series about the NCAA tournament selection process?
Oh, I think it'd be great. A documentary-ish? Absolutely.
Yeah, like a little mini series, 4 episodes or something, really showing the real, like a Hard Knock style deal.
Yeah, like starting on, when they first get there and then how the week progresses. I do. Now, they may not like the fact that we're going to see behind the curtain that they don't want us to see behind, but
they'd never let it happen for that reason.
Correct. But I think it would be fascinating.
By the way, going back to this whole Bubba Cunningham, North Carolina thing, can I tell you what I think is the stupidest part of this whole deal? The fact that they actually allegedly make that guy walk out of the room while they're talking about his team. Like, that matters. You've already ruined it, right? Like, he's already spoiled the group of people there.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if he steps out of the room now. Like, just leave him in the room. What are we doing?
So when he comes back, Jim Bob to his right goes, gotcha.
I got you, pal. Don't worry. You getting that $100,000, Bubba.
Yeah, no, and that's the other part.
Hey, drinks on you tonight.
Is he got a bonus out of this?
Yeah. Unbelievable. Your choice. Everything is taken care of and provided for the Final Four. You can either have a courtside seat at the Final Four, a suite at the Final Four, or you can be on your couch with a fully stocked fridge. What are you choosing?
Well, if they're going to pay me to be there, that's what they said, right?
You're not getting paid, but everything is taken care of. You don't have to pay a dime for anything.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Give me the suite.
I would go with that.
Give me the courtside seat. I'll take the courtside. The suite, sometimes there's just too many people in there and they want to talk about other things other than what's going on in the game. And I'm there for the game.
All right. Fair enough. I think I'm going suite, but as long I'm under my idea, I'm controlling who's the suite with me. So
yeah, that's a good point. Well, yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, the person to my right, the person to my left are usually would be friends. And you can talk. It's just, I don't know, man. There's sometimes just too much conversation going on.
Yeah, I get you. What is your favorite upset or buzzer beater in March Madness history?
Hard not to love the Valpo one, right off that play.
Bryce Drew.
Yeah, I mean that still was, because I remember where I was sitting in a bar, kind of just watching games. Really wasn't paying attention to that one. I kind of looked over right as it was unfolding. The sound was down on that game, and I think I let out a yelp, and I think people looked at me for a second. Then they all saw what had happened. I mean, it still truly is one of the most incredible plays to watch, in my opinion, especially with the stakes and the fact of them being the Cinderella and all of those things.
No, that's a great one. I mean, that's probably the first one that comes to my mind when I think about buzzer beaters is that play right there. I can visualize the call, the way, like the dog pile afterwards, everything. Yeah,
and again, the fact of I don't know what they might have been a 14 seed, 13 seed, right.
Something like that. I mean, the Tyus Edney coast to coast was pretty damn good for UCLA. Obviously, the Villanova shot to win it was pretty good. I mean, that determined a national champion after all. Can I just say, I remember Al Farouk Manesh. Remember that dude?
Yeah, I sure do.
What did he have a game winner, or did he just have like a million?
No, that was what did he do? He was Virginia, right? He's the one that hit that crazy like fall away at the buzzer to force an overtime.
Okay, was he Northern Iowa?
Oh, he was a Northern Iowa guy. Who was the guy from Virginia that did that in a game? He might have done it to Purdue.
Ali Farouk Manesh was Northern Iowa.
But there was a guy from Virginia that did that.
I don't know, but guess what? Ali Farouk Manesh is on Colorado State's staff as an assistant.
Nice.
How about that?
And even though it stuck a knife in my heart, I mean, the Leitner one is epic, right?
Yeah, that's the one we all see so often.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of fans around here like that one, but it's a pretty memorable one.
It's epic.
Would you rather be, this is our final question here. Would you rather be a bench warmer on a team that makes a deep run in the tournament or be a star player on a team that gets bounced early?
I think I'd rather be a star on a team that gets bounced early because maybe I can control my team not getting bounced early is the way I would look at it.
I don't think that was an option, but I'd still, if you're asking me though ahead of time, I'd still rather have that option, right? Like give me the chance to be the guy that takes my team.
If I'm the star on a team that's in, my team either is good enough to get in. I mean, maybe I got an automatic bid from a bad league and I'm a star on a team from a bad league, but it's still, I mean, the dude from Oakland's going to always have that moment. He made money off of that, man. He made money off of that.
That's the big thing now too, is by the way, you want to be the star player because you might be cashing a $500,000 check or more now.
I mean, he goes from Division II dude to cashing checks because he's making threes against Kentucky in the tournament and everybody saw it. Oh, he wasn't even their star, but you know what I'm saying.
No, shout out to Jack Golgi. Shout out to Trey Townsend that's playing for Arizona this year. So.
Right. So he's not the star. He's a good player. Caleb Love, I guess, would be their star, but
he's definitely not their star. Yeah.
No, but so he's not a bench warmer either. But he's in that other area of now I'm on a good team that can go far. Where I was a stud on a team that actually won a game or so.
He's living out both. Yeah, potentially if Arizona makes a run. So
yeah. What would you say you'd be?
I'd rather be the star player too. If nothing else, I'm just cashing the check, right?
Right. No, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
You got to think of NIL in this era, Skinny.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then I'm getting the transfer portal as soon as we get bounced early.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully for you, Xavier plays on. They play late on Friday, so hopefully we can hook up for a couple of cocktails and some games on Friday.
Yeah, and hopefully, maybe you can just make the drive there with Coach Cal's or Coach Pope's pan.
It's a good point.
Maybe Coach Cal will pay too. I don't know. We haven't asked him. Doesn't seem like something he would have said back in the day, but
no, it does not seem like something he would have said for sure. Good stuff. Rick, thanks as always. Enjoy the tournament, everybody. We're back next week to talk some Reds baseball, among other things. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly Potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.